Hello and good evening. Welcome to World Today, your window to the world where we get you the latest on the developments that are happening in India and across the world, getting you stories that matter, getting you stories that make a lot of geopolitical sense. I am Anil Thomas, and over the next 60 minutes we'll get you the latest, especially from Pakistan, still remaining in that F.A.T.F grey list. Lots to look forward to from an Indian perspective there. We'll also be taking a look at the World T20 that's just set to begin now, with the big matches starting from tomorrow. Lots to look forward in that particular aspect of T20 World Cup. Let's get started with the top stories. International watchdog F.A.T.F slams Pakistan and its ally Turkey for not doing enough to stop financing terror and bring terrorists and terror groups alike to justice. Many of these terror groups operate out of Pakistan and carry out terrorist attacks in India. Globally, surge in COVID cases seen once again as Russia's daily COVID-19 deaths and cases hit new record highs. Russia proposes to shut workplaces for a week at the start of November. US President Joe Biden's nominee to be US ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, takes a tough line on dealings with China at his Senate confirmation hearing, saying genocide in Xinjiang, abuses in Tibet and bullying of Taiwan must stop. Libya's Prime Minister and several foreign powers endorse holding of national elections on December 24th. As envisaged in a UN-backed peace plan aimed at resolving years of turmoil and division. Well, let's begin with the big news. Well, the top story that we are tracking here on World Today is Pakistan and F.A.T.F. Let's get started with that. The top story there, as international watchdog slams Pakistan and its ally Turkey for not doing enough to stop financing terror and bring terrorists and terror groups alike to justice. Many of these terror groups operate out of Pakistan and carry out terrorist attacks in India. The Financial Action Task Force, that's F.A.T.F, has placed Turkey under surveillance. It said there are serious offences remaining regarding Turkey's control over financial operations. The F.A.T.F's decision to retain Pakistan on and to add Turkey to its grey list puts a spotlight on these two countries' reluctance to take demonstrable and irreversible action against money laundering and terror financing.
Pakistan will remain on the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force. The global terror financing watchdog retained Pakistan on its grey list of countries. The decision was taken towards the end of a 3-day virtual plenary of the organization. F.A.T.F President Marcus Players told journalists that 3 new countries, Turkey, Jordan and Mali, have been added to the grey list. Players said Pakistan is cooperating, but it needs to take action on 4 more items on the F.A.T.F agenda. In June this year, the F.A.T.F had retained Pakistan on its grey list for failing to check money laundering leading to terror financing.
Overall, Pakistan is making good progress on this new action plan. 4 of the 7 action plan items are now addressed or largely addressed. This includes showing that financial supervisors are conducting on-site and off-site checks on non-financial sector businesses and enacting legislative amendments to improve international cooperation. Regarding its earlier action plan, which focused on terrorist financing issues and dates back to June 2018, Pakistan is still assessed to have largely addressed 26 out of 27 items. Pakistan has taken a number of important steps, but needs to further demonstrate that investigations and prosecutions are being pursued against the senior leadership of UN-designated terror groups.
The F.A.T.F asked Pakistan to investigate and prosecute United Nations designated terrorists such as Hafiz Saeed and Masood Azhar. It also asked Pakistan to work to address its strategically important deficiencies. Pakistan was placed on the grey list in June 2018. It has significant negative implications for Pakistan. It has become difficult for Pakistan to get financial aid from international organizations such as the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. Turkey, which enjoys close relations with Pakistan, was downgraded to the grey list for failing to head off money laundering and terrorist financing, a decision that could further erode foreign investment after a years-long exodus. In 2019, the F.A.T.F warned Turkey about serious shortcomings, including the need to improve measures to freeze assets linked to terrorism and weapons of mass destruction proliferation. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, what does Pakistan staying on the F.A.T.F mean? It's not only trouble for Pakistan, but also its close ally Turkey, that's also now in that F.A.T.F list. So clearly things not looking good, not only for Pakistan, but also Pakistan's close ally Turkey. Along with these two countries, the list also includes Jordan and Mali. That's the two new additions to the grey list along with Turkey. Now, what has the F.A.T.F asked? How does it lead to? What are the losses that Pakistan is facing? Pakistan's estimated loss being in that grey list is over $30 billion. It cannot take any loans from anybody. So clearly running out of funds when it comes to, hitting the World Bank, hitting the International Monetary Fund, not possible there. So clearly, lots to introspect for Pakistan there purely in terms of loss. Secondly, Pakistan is being bogged down there, especially when it comes to issues that are, that needed to be looked at. They have already looked into, of the 34 action points, 30 have been taken care of Pakistan, but that's still not enough to impress the F.A.T.F people. Pakistan has been bogged down by the terror financing issues. That's a big cause of concern, because Pakistan has addressed all of it, but just one of the 27 action points left. Pakistan's performance there. Now, what happens to Pakistan from here on? How does Pakistan take a look at taking it forward? The only window that's left for Pakistan is there's no more review that's going to take place in 2021. So the likelihood of Pakistan now getting reviewed or getting out of the list is very much in 2022, when in the month of February, around February 27th to March 4th, that's when you're going to have the working group meetings for F.A.T.F, and that's where Pakistan is likely to crop up again for discussion, and whether Pakistan can still meet that particular points. And if Pakistan can meet those points, maybe there could be a rethought on Pakistan getting out of that grey list. But as of now, losses are mounting. $30 billion is what we are $30 billion is what we are looking at estimated losses for Pakistan, and Pakistan as a country cannot afford that, because they can't go to the IMF, they can't go to the World Bank asking for financing or or need of funds due to this particular issue that is before them. Well, to get a perspective of what this F.A.T.F and the Pakistan staying in the grey list means, we've got T.C.A. Raghavan, former High Commissioner to Pakistan, joining us this evening on World Today. Good evening, sir. Welcome to World Today. First things first, how would this play out now, with Pakistan still remaining on the grey list and Turkey being added to it? Is the problem getting compounded for Pakistan?
Well, the important point is that Pakistan has been left with very little option, except to remain engaged with the F.A.T.F. But the costs of not remaining engaged are progressively higher, and this really is showing in the economic performance of that country for the past 2 or 3 years. So my important takeaway is as to how effective an instrument diplomacy, and especially multilateral diplomacy, is when dealing with a very, very chronic case of terrorism, which is hardwired into the social structures of Pakistan. And to an extent, one can even say that perhaps this has proven to be a more effective instrument than other means which the international community, or for that matter, individual countries, including India, have applied. So, the fact that Pakistan has been brought to a stage where it has shown reasonably good compliance on most of the issues of concern to F.A.T.F, but nevertheless certain very, very key areas remain where it has to take more action. I think it's a good thing, and we should hope and expect that Pakistan continues to cooperate with the F.A.T.F, because in the end, that is a good outcome for us and also for the entire region.
Okay, what could be the effect? We've seen Pakistan, this is not the first time that Pakistan has been in the grey list, but what are the effects or what are the fallouts of being in that grey list?
Well, Pakistan has been on the grey list a number of times before, so there are no immediate catastrophic impacts. It is not as if the Pakistan economy has not been able to face up to being on the grey list for a long period of time, but it has a cumulative impact. It increases the cost of doing business for Pakistan. It becomes one more factor in reducing the attractiveness of Pakistan for both domestic investors as also external investors. It has an impact on its ability to raise loans. So each of these factors has a medium and long-term impact, and the consequences of that are there to see, because the Pakistan economy, in terms of any measurable criteria such as its exports, the rate of domestic inflation, the exchange rate, is in pretty dire state just now.
Also with regards to, why, in this particular plenary session that was held in October, Pakistan got retained. What are the reasons? When you look at the fine print, it says of the 27 action points, 26 they have followed. So what pushed Pakistan to remain there in that grey list?
Well, the full details of that process are not available, and most of the internal dealings remain confidential. But my guess is the fact that the Pakistani legal system and the financial judicial system has been unable to take demonstrable action against a variety of terrorist groups which have used the dysfunctionalities present in Pakistan to expand their operations, raise funds. I think that has been a factor which has led to its long retention in the grey list.
Also with regards to F.A.T.F, how does F.A.T.F now take, now it's not going to be considered anytime in this particular year, but when is the next window where it could reconsider Pakistan getting off the hook, or consider Pakistan's case again, or take a serious look at Pakistan on what Pakistan has done, especially when it comes to the action points that have not been fulfilled?
Well, the next formal meeting of the F.A.T.F, as you mentioned, is in February. But in the period between now and February, I presume that the Pakistanis will have to work very hard, both domestically, so that there are legislative and procedural changes, so that they can come up with a action plan which will satisfy the F.A.T.F in its February meeting. So it is not as if, as far as Pakistan is concerned, that now all action is suspended till February, but in fact they have to step on the gas between now and February to make sure that they make further changes in their domestic legal, judicial and financial structures. It's not an easy process by any standards, because you are talking about a country which is quite large, which has major problems which many developing countries face, to reorient that to make a more robust financial system so that terrorist groups are not able to misuse it for their own purposes. It's not easy, but as I said, the important thing is that Pakistan has been forced to engage with an external institution to bring about domestic changes. I think that's, on the whole, a pretty good takeaway for all those countries in the region which have been badly impacted by terrorist groups operating out of Pakistan.
Mr. Raghavan, when one looks at the geopolitical effect, especially on the immediate neighbors, how does one see this spill out? Considering what's happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan's role, in being instrumental in especially the way the Taliban has been able to gain control. So how would you see the immediate impact, especially on neighboring countries?
I don't see any immediate impact, because F.A.T.F is only one instrument. And the capacities and powers it has when it deals with a country like Pakistan are not that many. Okay. It has a certain cumulative power which is felt over a period of time, as we now see in the case of Pakistan. But the important takeaway for me is that it shows the utility of having a structure of incentives and disincentives when dealing with a country like Pakistan.
Okay.
It is too big and in many ways too significant regionally to be used only, that the only instrument that we use is pressure or security related pressure. I think a mixed bag of incentives and disincentives or a carrot and stick approach seems to also show very good results, as the F.A.T.F example seems to be bringing out.
Mr. Raghavan, when one looks at, various other bodies which have tried to somewhere, keep Pakistan under check, do you somewhere feel F.A.T.F has been very effective, especially, in somewhere checkmating Pakistan when it comes to terror financing and also especially when it comes to, money laundering?
Well, there are not many bodies of this kind, unfortunately. And
Okay.
The fact is that it is not easy, as I said, to put a total stop to financing, because the people who misuse existing national systems also are doing a great deal of thinking in terms of finding loopholes, or sometimes they are assisted, as in the case of Pakistan, by elements of the state itself. There are not too many bodies of this kind, which I think is a pity, because more external scrutiny and more external systems of incentives and disincentives is certainly an effective way of dealing with a country like Pakistan.
Also with regards to, the countries that are in the grey list, now when one looks at the, that roughly around 23 countries in the grey list, what's the sense that you make, among the countries that are there, is Pakistan one that spent the longest time there, especially, considering that they got into this grey list way back in 2018?
That is true. Pakistan has been on the grey list for a long time, and it's also not the first time that it's been on the grey list. Perhaps there are other countries too, but this is a pretty significant problem, and it's not just a Pakistan-specific problem, because there are many other parts of the world where the capacity of terrorist groups to use existing financial systems to raise funds and transfer funds is quite prevalent. But the fact is that because you have an instrument of this kind, and which has now shown that it is reasonably effective, it is certainly by no means entirely effective, and it will never be successful in drawing up a foolproof system. But if it is reasonably effective in ensuring state compliance with international standards, it's not a small achievement.
Okay. Considering the fact that Pakistan has roughly lost around $30 billion US, one makes a rough estimate of the losses staying in that grey list on the F.A.T.F. Can Pakistan afford that in the first place? Secondly, what's the turnaround? If they're looking at an escape window, what could be the escape window that Pakistan can look forward to?
Well, the only escape for Pakistan is to do a major course correction, and that comes really from altering existing mindsets. And many in Pakistan see terrorist groups not as liabilities but as assets, and they feel that these are effective instruments of state policy. And frankly, the only long-term solution is a change in that mindset. It will not happen quickly. It has taken Pakistan 30 or 35 years to reach the stage where it is now. Change, therefore, will also take a long time. But as long as there is a process in place, right now, the general frustration which there is with Pakistan internationally is that there is no clear process in place which suggests that Pakistan is moving in the right direction. And certainly what has happened in Afghanistan is an example which animates and illustrates that very clearly.
Since you mentioned that there is no process that's involved, do you see that some leadership in Pakistan being able to bring that about, or do you feel, the army would have a larger role to play in that?
But given the realities of Pakistan, this change of mindset can only be effective. It is a change both in the military mindset and also in that of its political class. Unfortunately, the signs of that are not very visible. What the extent of engagement or cooperation which Pakistan has shown with the F.A.T.F is because it has been forced, or it has it has been induced and forced into showing that kind of compliance. Possibly left on its own, we would have not seen even the results that we have seen up till now. So there is no easy way out of it except that externally monitored compliance of Pakistan, and for the international community and for bodies such as the F.A.T.F and others remaining vigilant about what is happening internally within Pakistan. I think that is really important. It's also important that countries outside Pakistan, and especially countries like India, realize the effectiveness of having a package of incentives and disincentives rather than just go on the disincentive route.
Also, one final word before I let you. This is not the first time that Pakistan has been in this grey list of F.A.T.F. Can they be trusted? In case the next meeting that happens, where there is a likelihood, or where Pakistan gains a chance to comes out of the grey list, do you see that Pakistan can be trusted? Because it's not likely that those marks are going to change pretty quickly.
I think what the F.A.T.F is endeavoring to do is to create institutions within Pakistan which will mount resistance to any kind of pushback or sliding back where terrorist financing is concerned. And their expectation will be that they will be able to create robust enough institutions which will be able to then undertake this task in Pakistan through changes in procedures, methods of banking operations, etc. Now, whether it will happen or not, I think is an open question. But I think we should not certainly prejudge it. We should proceed on the assumption that no positive change is possible in Pakistan and is just going to continue in the same old way. I think that would be also in a kind of way self-defeating.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you and appreciate you joining us, giving us an insight, especially when it comes to F.A.T.F and Pakistan still remaining on the grey list. Thank you and appreciate you joining us this evening on World Today. Well, moving on now, US President Joe Biden's nominee for the country's ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, took a tough line on dealings with China at its confirmation hearing before a committee of lawmakers. Nicholas Burns said genocide in Xinjiang, abuses in Tibet, and bullying of Taiwan must stop.
The PRC's genocide in Xinjiang, its abuses in Tibet, its smothering of Hong Kong's autonomy and freedoms, and its bullying of Taiwan are unjust and must stop. Beijing's recent actions against Taiwan are especially objectionable. The United States is right to continue its one China policy. The administration and Congress, together on a bipartisan basis, should help Taiwan to maintain a self-defense capability, and that's the language of the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979.
Well, Nicholas Burns, a career diplomat and former U.S. ambassador to NATO, said the United States cannot trust China to meet commitments it had made on Taiwan, and that Washington, D.C. had quote-unquote enormous latitude to deepen its security assistance to the island.
We obviously cannot trust China to meet the commitments it's made on the Taiwan issue. When Congress passed the Taiwan Relations Act, when administration after administration pursued a one China policy, we obviously did so on the presumption that there would be peace in the cross-strait relationship between Taiwan and China. And there isn't much peace today. There's assertiveness and aggression. Our responsibility is to make Taiwan a tough nut to crack, help it increase its asymmetric defenses through the Taiwan Relations Act, and other countries can do that as well. It's a central issue in the relationship now.
Meanwhile, NATO defense ministers discussed matters ranging from the alliance's Russia policy to the technological innovation investment during a meeting in Brussels on Thursday. Russia said on Monday it would halt the activities of its diplomatic mission to NATO after the Western military alliance expelled 8 Russians, saying they were spies. The defense ministers are set to agree on a new master plan to defend against any potential Russian attack on multiple fronts, reasserting a bid to deter Moscow despite the alliance's new focus on China. The Taliban takeover of Afghanistan and the lessons learned from the NATO pullout are also among the matters to be discussed, along with innovation spending and the relationship between NATO and the European Union. European leaders gathered for a summit in Brussels on Thursday, which may prove to be German Chancellor Angela Merkel's last, with tensions simmering between Poland and the bloc's liberal majority. German political parties have been in talks since last month's election to forming a ruling coalition, and if they succeed by mid-December, the 67-year-old Merkel will not return to Brussels as Chancellor after 16 years and over 100 summits. Long-running tensions between Poland's ruling nationalists and the bloc's liberal majority have risen sharply since Poland's Constitutional Tribunal ruled on October 7th that elements of European Union law were incompatible with the country's charter. In challenging a central tenet of EU's integration, the case risks precipitation of new fundamental crisis for the bloc, as well as Poland losing generous European handouts. Libya's Prime Minister and several foreign powers on Thursday have endorsed the holding of a national election on December 24th as envisaged in a UN-backed peace plan aimed at resolving years of turmoil and division in the country. Speaking at the Libya Stabilization Conference in Tripoli, Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Debaya said that it was possible to end the crisis that has engulfed the country since the NATO-backed uprising that toppled Gaddafi in 2011. US President Joe Biden said on Thursday that the United States will come to Taiwan's defense and has a commitment to defend the island. China claims its own, though the White House said later there was no change in policy towards the island. In a town hall program, President Joe Biden said that US has or have a commitment to do that, while Washington is required by law to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself. It has long followed a policy of strategic ambiguity on whether it would intervene militarily to protect Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. In August, a Biden administration official said US policy on Taiwan had not changed after the president appeared to suggest the United States would defend the island if they were attacked. Well, let's now take a look at updates on COVID-19 from across the world. So far as numbers go, total number of COVID-19 cases in the world, 24 crores 32 lakh cases of COVID-19. The number of people who have recovered, the big positive when one looks at that screen, 22 crores 4 lakh people world over have recovered from coronavirus. The total number of fatalities world over slowly inching towards that 49 lakh 50,000 mark as we speak. 49 lakh 45,000 deaths being reported world over. United States continues to remain the worst affected country by the pandemic, both in terms of infections as well as fatalities. In terms of infections, over 4 crores 16 lakh cases of COVID-19. The fatalities or death toll remains about 7 lakh 53,000 in the United States of America. The World Health Organization, that's WHO, has called on the world's 20 richest countries to step up donations of COVID-19 vaccine to the global south. WHO's Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said that the G20 countries must fulfill their dose sharing commitments immediately. Gordon Brown, WHO Ambassador for Global Health Financing, informed that there is still a shortfall of 500 million vaccines to reach WHO's 40% vaccination target in all countries in mid-2022, while 240 million doses are lying unused in the West. In US, a panel of advisors to the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention authorized the booster shots of COVID-19 vaccine of Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. The US Food and Drug Administration had not only unanimously voted to provide the booster doses of Moderna and J&J to everyone above the age of 18, but also backed the use of different vaccine for boost. and said Americans can choose a different shot from the original inoculation. The CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices voted to recommend booster shots for everyone 18 years and older who received a first dose of Johnson & Johnson vaccine at least 2 months earlier. For those who received their second dose of Moderna's vaccine at least 6 months earlier, ACIP recommended a third shot for those aged 65 and over, as well as some individuals at risk or severe illness and those at risk of exposure to the virus through their jobs. Well, let's now tell you how the world is seeing a new surge in COVID-19 cases.
Globally, one can witness a surge in COVID cases once again. As Russia's daily COVID-19 deaths and cases hit new record highs, Russia has proposed to shut workplaces for a week at the start of November. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Tatiana Golikova has proposed that October 30th to November 7 be deemed non-working days to combat rising infections. Golikova said people should have to present QR codes on their mobile phones to show they were vaccinated or had recovered from COVID to get access to some public events or places. The sharp rise in the number of cases and fatalities has led Kremlin to urge people to get vaccinated. The country has so far registered over 80,60,000 cases of COVID-19 with more than 2,25,000 fatalities. In Ukraine's capital Kiev, hundreds of people lined up to get their COVID-19 vaccine jabs. The country has been witnessing rise in daily cases and fatalities, forcing authorities to tighten pandemic restrictions. The authorities have opened hundreds of vaccination points, including at train stations, in a bid to tackle the recent surge. In Ukraine, a country of more than 4 crore 33 lakh population, more than 27 lakh cases have been registered. The country's death toll from COVID-19 has crossed 62,300. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said that despite the high number of infections, the country will stick to its current plan to manage the pandemic. Johnson's government has said it is relying on vaccinations, including booster shots for the vulnerable, to avoid winter lockdowns.
The numbers of infections are high, but we're within the parameters of what the predictions were, what SPI-M and the others said where we would be at this stage, given the steps that we've taken. So we're sticking with our plan.
Meanwhile, the Hong Kong authorities prevented a Royal Caribbean cruise ship from departing the city's terminal late on Thursday as a crew member was suspected to have COVID-19 after routine testing. About 1,000 passengers out of a total of 1,200 had already boarded the ship before the 4-night trip was cancelled. All have to undergo compulsory testing but were allowed to leave the ship as they did not have direct contact with the crew member. Moving to Iran, which is bracing for a 6th major wave of COVID-19 infections, even as its nationwide vaccine efforts have accelerated in recent weeks. The virus has so far killed close to 1,25,000 people, while more than 5.8 million cases have been reported in Iran since February 2020, according to Health Ministry figures. Daily deaths are significantly down from the peak of 709 registered in late August, but still more than 150 Iranians are falling victim to the virus as more than 10,000 new cases are detected each day. Meanwhile, in some good news coming from Australia, residents of Melbourne flocked to the city's cafes after the world's most locked-down city emerged from its latest spate of restrictions designed to combat the spread of COVID-19. Just over 70% of adults in Australia are now fully vaccinated, and many residents are planning to fly overseas again as international border restrictions start to ease from November. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, time now for news from across the globe.
Barbados decided its first ever president to replace Britain's Queen Elizabeth as head of state in a decisive step towards shedding the Caribbean islands' colonial past. Sandra Mason was elected late on Wednesday by a 2/3 vote of a joint session of the country's House of Assembly and Senate, a milestone, the government said in a statement, on its road to republic. A former British colony that gained independence in 1966, the nation of just under 300,000 had long maintained ties with the British monarchy, but calls for a full sovereignty and homegrown leadership have risen in recent years. Mason will be sworn in on 30th November, the country's 55th anniversary of independence from Britain. Tehran and Ankara
signed a memorandum of understanding to boost cooperation on security issues, underlining their determination to develop strategic ties and jointly fight terrorism and trafficking. It foresees the prevention of all kinds of terrorist and illegal acts concerning the two countries, especially in the border regions, and the mutual development of all kinds of law enforcement activities. In Nepal, as many as 101 people have lost their lives after post-monsoon downpour brought flash floods and landslide in the Himalayan nation. The government also said that at least 41 people are still missing after the disaster struck over the week. The annual monsoon season spans from the end of June till September. However, the late monsoon showers this year caught the Himalayan nation off guard. Parts of western Nepal were flooded on Thursday as days of heavy rain triggered landslides and flash floods across the country. Swollen rivers have swept inland, with houses and roads flooded and rice paddy crops submerged. Flash floods and landslides are common in Nepal during the monsoon season from mid-June through September. Authorities have warned of more rain in the next few days. Hundreds of school children stormed the Democratic Republic of Congo's parliament on Thursday amid a strike by school teachers over unresolved issues related to the rollout of government's free primary education program. Teachers went on strike at the start of the school year on 4th October over several issues including salaries, bonus pay and retirement age, according to the Congo Teachers Union. On Thursday, hundreds of students in their uniforms charged into the National Assembly, waving branches and chanting, "We want to study." The United Nations says more than 700,000 people have been displaced by the worst floods to hit South Sudan in decades. At least 40 people have died across the country as heavy rain and flash floods destroy livestock, farmlands and homes. The floods have mainly affected 4 states. Some of those who have fled have been displaced numerous times due to conflict and 3 years of consecutive flooding. Scientists have blamed climate change for the flooding in South Sudan and other countries in Eastern Africa. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, Bangladesh police has arrested a man who was identified on Wednesday on the basis of CCTV cameras on suspicion of keeping the Holy Quran in a Durga Mandap in Comilla. The country witnessed widespread violence between October 13th and 16th after the incident of Quran being placed inside the temple went viral on social media. Iqbal Hussain was identified on Wednesday by the Comilla police through CCTV footage. Police said the suspect was arrested from Cox's Bazar's area on Thursday night and sent to Comilla. Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Vikram Doraiswamy, has said that the larger tradition of India and Bangladesh has been of inclusion and humanity. Addressing a gathering of Hindu, Christians and Buddhist community people, the High Commissioner said that the founding values of India and Bangladesh reflect the pluralistic spirit of South Asia, which must be defended at all costs. Well, India will start its ICC T20 World Cup outing against arch rivals Pakistan at the Dubai International Stadium. India has not lost a single game against Pakistan in the T20 World Cups. It would be interesting to see whether Babar Azam-led side will be able to break the jinx on October 24th. So very quickly, let's tell you how the ICC World T20 is placed right now. First, talking about the ICC T20 World Cup venues. There are 3 venues: Dubai International Stadium, Sheikh Zayed Stadium, Abu Dhabi, and the Sharjah Cricket Ground. The ICC T20 Super 12 teams have been divided into 2 groups. Group 1, England, Australia, South Africa, West Indies, Bangladesh along with Sri Lanka. Group 2, India, Pakistan, New Zealand, Afghanistan, Scotland, Ireland or Namibia. That's how this particular team, that's still to be decided later tonight. The format of the ICC World T20 will be Super 12s. And the Super 12 stage will see 2 groups of 6 teams, each playing in a round-robin format. The top 2 teams from each group will progress to the semi-finals, and then the final is slated on the 14th of November. The 2 Super 12 groups each feature 4 of the automatic qualifiers, India and the top 7 teams on the ICC rankings at the cutoff date, and round 1 qualifiers. ICC World T20 point system in the Super 12. For every round robin, the point system will be followed. For a win, it's an outright 2 points. Tie, no result or abundant, 1 point is what a team will get. Loss or forfeit, 0 points. Well, next in sports, taking sports further, updates from the European Open tennis. Number 2 seed Diego Schwartzman ousted Andy Murray to reach the quarterfinals of the European Open, with Lloyd Harris and Martin Fucsovics also winning their matches, setting up a clash in the next round. Schwartzman will next face the winner of a match between Brandon Nakashima and Henry Langsson, who also play later today. Earlier in the day, 7 seed Harris looked solid with a commanding 6-2, 6-3 win over Jan-Lennart Struff. The 24-year-old South African fired 11 aces to power past his German opponent. He will now face Fucsovics in the quarterfinals. The Hungarian was also hot on serve, using 7 aces to help him upset the 4th seed Roberto Bautista Agut of Spain in 3 sets, 6-7, 6-3, 6-1. Well, FIFA officials have visited Kansas City, Missouri as part of the bid process to host some of the 2026 World Cup matches. Kansas City officials leading the World Cup bid held a press conference along with FIFA delegates who were in town to inspect Arrowhead Stadium, the city's proposed venue and home of the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs owner Clark Hunt and Colin Smith, FIFA's head of competition and events, were among the attendees. Kansas City is one of 17 U.S. cities bidding to host World Cup matches in 2026, when the world's biggest sporting event will be contested across North America. Well, a group of thrill seekers who are blind or visually impaired took to the air to try their hands at indoor skydiving in Barcelona wind tunnel. Participants were overjoyed by the experience and the sense of freedom they felt as they flew in the wind tunnel alongside an instructor. Wednesday's high-flying adventure was part of the Handyfly project, which started in 2016 and aims to bring parachuting and indoor skydiving to people with disabilities. The event was hosted by indoor flight company Windoor in Barcelona and done in conjunction with the European Commission and the ONCE, which benefits people who are visually impaired. Well, let's now take a look at some stories that are beyond headlines.
The world's largest and highest Ferris wheel has been opened to the public in Dubai with a stunning fireworks show. Located on the Blue Waters Island, the Dubai Eye, known as Eye in Dubai in Arabic, stands at 250 meters tall. Asterix and the Griffin, the latest edition of the famous French comic series Asterix and Obelix, went on sale on bookshelves. At the Paris Montparnasse chain of French books retailer F.A.T.F, mascots dressed as the 2 central Gallic characters can be seen standing and meeting with the visitors. F.A.T.F said that the Asterix series represents a significant portion of their comic book sales and that most clients order them online and collect them in store. A private, anonymous US collector bought the fossilized remains of Big John, the largest Triceratops dinosaur ever discovered by paleontologists, for 6.65 million euros at a Paris auction. Big John, named after the owner of the land where the dinosaur's bones were found, roamed modern-day South Dakota more than 66 million years ago. The ice rink at London's Natural History Museum is returning for one more festive season as its time at the iconic venue comes to an end after 16 years. From today onwards, skaters will be able to enjoy the ice against the backdrop of the museum and the 30-feet Christmas tree, an activity which the organizing body said is a holiday tradition for many in the British capital. A newborn zebra made a public appearance at the Zenpal Zoo located in Garcia, a municipality in the northern Mexican state of Nuevo Leon. The birth represents a growing hope for the conservation of the gravy zebra, also known as the imperial zebra, which is the most threatened of the three species of zebra. Born to father Poncho and mother Estrella only 10 days ago, the so far unnamed baby weighs approximately between 10 to 15 kilograms and is approximately 50 centimeters tall. The Scream, arguably the most iconic image in art, is the centerpiece of a new museum dedicated to its creator Edvard Munch that opens in Oslo on Friday. But visitors won't know which of its many versions they will see until they arrive. The figure holding its head in a swirling red sunset was inspired by a stay in Berlin in 1892 when the Norwegian was leading a light of the symbolist movement. Between 1893 and 1910, Munch painted the Scream many times using different techniques. The Waterfront Museum will have access to 3 of those canvases but show only one at a time as they're very fragile. Archaeologists found 4 burial sites belonging to an ancient civilization dating from 400 to 200 BCE in Chiclayo, Peru. These tombs are the first sites found in the Lambaxeque Valley related to the Wari culture. The burials belong to children and youth that, according to archaeologists, present clear signs of violence. In the tombs, archaeologists also found different objects such as a pitcher with Mochica iconography, a bottle belonging to the Sikan culture, a decorated pot, and a ceremonial tooling knife in the shape of a half moon. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, talking about film festivals and IFFI, India's 52nd International Film Festival is round the corner in the national capital, New Delhi. Union Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Singh Thakur announced important attractions related to this edition of the film festival. Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting L. Murugan, Information and Broadcasting Secretary Apurva Chandra and Festival Director Chaitanya Prasad were present on the occasion.
20th to 28th November 2021. Mark these dates when eyes of cinema lovers around the world will be on India. One of the most beautiful states of India, Goa, is all set. The 52nd International Film Festival of India will begin in the state with a spectacular ceremony. The countdown to IFFI 2021 has begun. Tackling all the challenges of COVID-19, this year's IFFI is going to be a very special and one of the most memorable editions ever. There are going to be many segments and initiatives which will be organized for the first time in the history of IFFI. The Satyajit Ray Lifetime Achievement Award at the 52nd IFFI will honor 2 of the best directors of the world. American film director Martin Scorsese and Hungary's acclaimed director Oscar winner Esteban Szabo. Among the world's greatest directors will be honored with the Satyajit Ray Lifetime Achievement Award. India is celebrating its 75th year of independence, the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. So, for the first time, 75 creative youngsters from all over the country are being given a unique opportunity to showcase their talent on the stage of IFFI. To meet the veterans attending IFFI, the jury will judge and select them on 7 arenas such as direction, screenwriting and acting. The last date for applications is 31st October.
आइए IFFI में भाग लीजिए, इंटरनेशनल फिल्म फेस्टिवल ऑफ इंडिया एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म है जहां पर उभरती हुई प्रतिभाओं को भी अपनी प्रतिभा दिखाने का मौका मिलता है। अंतर्राष्ट्रीय फिल्मों से लेकर राष्ट्रीय फिल्मों को वहां पर दिखाने का मौका मिलता है, रीजनल फिल्मों को दिखाने का मौका मिलता है। अब तो OTT प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर जो दिखाया जाता है वो भी इस बार IFFI पर आपको देखने को मिलेगा। ये अपने आप में एक बड़ी उपलब्धि है, एक मौका है, एक ऐसे 75 युवा क्रिएटिव माइंड्स को भी आगे आने का जो अप्लाई कर सकते हैं, जिनको चिन्हित किया जाएगा और उनको अवसर मिलेगा इंडस्ट्री लीडर से मिलने का वहां पर और मास्टर क्लास अटेंड करने का। तो आइए जुड़िए इस बार के ईफी से, अगर आप में है दम तो बढ़ाओ कदम।
In times of the COVID-19 era, the popularity of OTT platforms reached new heights. For the first time ever, IFFI has invited major OTT players to participate in the festival. 5 big OTT platforms including Netflix, Sony Live, Woot, Amazon Prime will do international premiere of their films and series this time at IFFI. IFFI 2021 will begin with The King of All the World, directed by Carlos Saura. Mid-fest film will be The Power of the Dog.
It's just a man. Only another man.
Films that have won acclaim at major film festivals across the world will be screened at IFFI. Gobelin School La Image will host a virtual masterclass in Paris's famous School of Visual Communication and Arts. This time, a record number of 694 entries have been received for the international section. The jury for the international competition has also been announced. The chairperson of the jury is Rakshan Benatimad, also known as First Lady of Iranian cinema. Director Stephen Wally, United Kingdom. Sri Lankan film producer Vimukti Jayasundara. Oscar-nominated Colombian filmmaker Ciro Guerra. Neel Madhav Panda, who has won many national and international awards from India. BRICS Film Festival is being organized along with IFFI. IFFI has 5 focus countries this time: Brazil, Russia, China, India and South Africa. Curiosity about the 52nd edition of IFFI, one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world, continues to grow. Despite the challenges of the corona era, there has not been a slight decrease in its attractiveness. And filmmakers, directors, actors and cine-lovers from across the globe are desperate to be part of IFFI once again. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, time now to take a jog down memory lane and take a look at all the events that took place on this very day in history.
This day in the year 1883, the original Metropolitan Opera House in New York held its grand opening with a performance of Gounod's Faust. The Metropolitan Opera has attracted amazing voices and talented artists from around the world, like legendary conductor Arturo Toscanini and great singer Geraldine Ferrar. On this day in 1906, French artist Paul Cezanne, considered one of the greatest of post-impressionists, died at the age of 67. His work created bridges between 19th century impressionism and the development of key movements in 20th century art. He was particularly important as a precursor to Cubism. This day in the year 1910, in one of the most notorious criminal cases of the 20th century, American physician Hawley Harvey Crippen, widely known as Dr. Crippen, was found guilty of murdering his wife. He was executed in a British prison the following month. On this day in 1962, US President John F. Kennedy alerted Americans to the Cuban Missile Crisis, declaring a naval blockade to prevent further missile shipments to the island country 90 miles off the coast of the US. The blockade was in response to the discovery of Soviet missile bases on the island. This day in the year 1964, French philosopher and writer Jean-Paul Sartre was announced the winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. However, he became the first person to decline the award. In his novels, essays and plays, Sartre advanced the philosophy of existentialism, arguing that each individual must create meaning for his or her own life because life itself had no innate meaning. On this day in 1968, Apollo 7 returned to Earth after its 11-day mission. All 3 American astronauts had a common cold, but the mission was a success. They successfully released and were able to redock between the orbiting ship and manned lunar module. This day in the year 1986, US President Ronald Reagan signed into law the US Tax Reform Act, also known as the Tax Reform Act of 1985. It flattened rates, simplified rules and removed countless loopholes. It closed a loophole which had helped wealthy families shield assets by designated inheritance past a generation. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, that's all we have time for in this edition of World Today. I hope you liked it. That's it from me and my entire team signing off. Bye-bye. Take care. Have a safe and wonderful evening ahead. Bye-bye.